Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Harris, and I'm your host of the Game Plan with Disability Rights California. I just got finished interviewing Vance Taylor, and let me make sure I get his title right, the Chief of the Office of Access and Functional Needs for the California Office of Emergency Services. It was a great interview. We talked about his role in making sure that all Californians are safe. We also got to talk a little bit about his family and his background as a leader in the disability space. And then we also finished up with finding out his game plan for the next 12 months. I'm really excited about it. I think you all are really going to enjoy it. It is a jam packed show, and I hope you all appreciate it.
The Game Plan is a production of Disability Rights California, a space to strategize, organize, and posterize for the future of the disability rights movement. For more information on our work, please visit us at DisabilityRightsCa.org.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Harris, and I am the host of the Game Plan with Disability Rights California. We're really excited because we have a very special guest with us today for this interview, and we're going to get right into it. Vance, it's wonderful to have you, and really appreciate you being here.
That's
with
great.
us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So we're going to get right into it and give you an opportunity to tell everybody a little bit about your role and what you do, because it's funny, I was joking with some of our communications team. It's a really big job. Seems very, very complicated, a lot of moving parts. But if you could talk a little bit about your role, that'd be great.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I've never had one of those jobs that's like straightforward, right? I can't be like, I'm a lawyer, and people know what that is.
Right.
The elevator speech version of how I summarize it is basically that I'm here to make sure that California's emergency management system works for everybody, right? So whether you're an older adult, whether you're somebody with a disability, if you're anybody with like an access or a functional consideration, we just want to make sure that the way you plan, prepare, respond, and recover is going to be applicable and it's going to work for you too.
That's right. Well, how do you get into a job like that? I mean, I feel like we all recognize its importance, and we recognize that California has a lot going on. But how do you get into that space?
So California is really unique. The community recognized that there's this disproportionate impact that people with disabilities experience before, during, and after a disaster. They talked to the governor, they rallied together, and eventually he created this Office of Access and Functional Needs within his Office of Emergency Services, and placed at its head a gubernatorially appointed senior level executive to really be the tip of the spear for that mission of making emergency management inclusive. So the fact that California even has this is super unique. Other states have what they call access and functional needs coordinators, but it's always like mid-level, right? So you're never in the room when the discussion's happening, when decisions are being made. California is very different in that regard. So it's not a lot of these jobs that are out there, right? California's sort of one of 50, or one of one. My personal background, so I'm a native Californian, and we can talk about disability and all that stuff, but just from like a sort of a educational and professional background. I've got a bachelor's, I got a master's in Homeland Security. I lived in DC for 13 years. I worked for 2 members of Congress. I was all in on Homeland Security issues, and that led to emergency management issues. Um, it's interesting because as I delved more and more into those areas, it became really clear, especially after Hurricane Katrina, that there's a problem here, right? And it's not that you've got people that are trying to exclude. It's that you've got well-intentioned people that just don't have the perspective, right? No lived experience. So I did all that for a number of years. An opening came in California because Richard DeVelder, my predecessor, retired and then passed away. And the governor asked, "Hey, will you move 3,000 miles with your family and
Yeah.
come take this role?" And I said yes.
Well, that's awesome. And, I mentioned California has a lot going on. I'm also a native Californian, grew up in Sacramento, actually.
You're a Giants fan, right?
Never.
No, what?
Never. No. I an A's fan, begrudgingly at this point, unfortunately.
So your favorite teams in Vegas is basically what's happening?
It's a difficult subject. It's way too difficult to talk about.
I like that they're here now, though.
That's exactly
That's
right.
awesome.
I have gone to more games this season because they're in Sacramento than I have for a long time, and I'm glad that they're here as well. I mean, it's a new energy in this area that this community deserves, and I think relishes. But it's and I try not to think too far in advance or too far in the future about when they'll actually leave. But I'll appreciate the time that they're here.
It's enjoyable while it lasts.
That's right. But one of the things that we know, living in California, and it's happened, of course, more and more lately because of climate change and all of the other challenges, but just all the different emergencies that happen in California. California is a huge state, 40 million people, and whether it's fires, of course, whether it's mudslides that are resulting of fire damage, smoke as a result of the fires, earthquake preparation and kind of what folks need to do to prepare for that. I guess what kind of, in your role in thinking about accessibility and disability, with all of these things happening, how can one person or one office take some of these things on?
Yeah. So there's always something going on. On any given day, we've got, I get these reports across my inbox, and it's weird because it's like wildfires and red flag warning,
Yep.
and at the same time it's like flash flood.
Right.
And it seems like, how is that possible?
Right.
But you've got a state that you could drive 12 hours and be in the same state.
That's right.
So yeah, it's pretty crazy on that front. How do we tackle it? I'll just tell you what my approach was. I put a lot of miles on that work van. I spent, countless hours going up and down the state, meeting with emergency managers, because I needed them to understand what we were dealing with as a community. I needed them to think about their jobs in a different way. I would ask them to picture their mothers, their fathers, their sons, their daughters, their siblings, a neighbor, somebody they truly loved who had a disability or an access or functional need. And then I would ask, what would you do? How far would you go to make sure that that person could be safe when there was an emergency management issue? Right? When disaster strikes, what wouldn't you do to ensure their safety, health, their security, and their independence, and also their dignity? And when they think about it from that perspective, it's like, what wouldn't we do, right? We do anything and everything. I said, okay, so then let's adopt that approach in our day-to-day jobs, right? So whether you're in logistics, or response or recovery or mitigation or planning. You each have a role to play. And each of us needs to stretch so we can be more inclusive. And then I just started sharing real life stories with them. Because Eric, I had to be the one that was at the shelter and would watch as people languished, right? Because we hadn't integrated for their needs. I was the one that, literally the little old lady would hold my hand and with tears in her eyes tell me about, I watched my home burn down with my wheelchair inside. Help me, what can I do? I'd be the one where people would say, my son had a disability, he couldn't get out. And you gotta remember, to me, this is the most human thing we do. Right? Making sure that everyone can be safe. And so those experiences changed me as a person. And they changed the way I thought about our work. And I really felt it was part of my mission to help others in the field understand that, to feel it. Even though they didn't live it, they could still feel it. And so I knew that if we could get them to flip that switch and think about it from that perspective, that they would forever do their jobs differently. And 10 years later, there has been a cultural shift in the way emergency managers look at this issue. What's phenomenal to me is if you look at what California is doing, it's actually spreading nationwide. It's sort of that adage, when California sneezes, the rest of the nation gets a cold.
That's right.
And so I'll go to these conferences, International Association of Emergency Managers and others, and get people from Florida and Texas and Pennsylvania and Virginia. And they'll say, we completely reworked the way we do our sheltering operations based on the work that you guys put together. And it blows my mind. I do need to be really quick to say that we've been able to do this because of our partners, right? It's not just outstanding emergency managers. It's also outstanding independent living centers, right? It's you and then Disability Rights California. It's being able to work in partnership as a whole community in order to benefit the whole community. We've been able to achieve what we have.
Yeah, and I think, you're such a good example in your work of this, of making sure that disabled people are in the room when these decisions are happening and at the forefront. I think we've all recognized, all of us advocates here in the state, and really disabled folks all over the country, recognize how much of a priority it has been for you to make sure that all types of disabled people with all different types of lived experience are a part of the processes. So we're really grateful for all that you've done in that role and continue to do, especially with uncertainty in all spaces, just not knowing what's going to happen, when it's going to happen. That's the whole idea of emergency response. So just really grateful for all that you've done and continue to do. So I want to shift gears just a little bit. A couple of different things. One, family stuff.
Yeah.
Kind of fun things outside of work. We both, just in the hallway coming in, talking about being a parent, me being at the very early stages and you being a more veteran, I guess, if you will.
Worn down.
What are some of the things that family life has either taught you? What has that experience done for you? Just anything you wanna mention about this family life.
Um, so I mean, gosh, so many things. For me, my family's been really grounding, right? So times in my life or my career where I think, man, I'm hot stuff, and you go home and your kids like don't even care. Like,
That's right. That's right.
okay, good for you. What's for dinner, right? Like,
Yep.
um,
Yep.
or times when I felt just really overwhelmed and just devastated, and you go home and they wrap their arms around you, and you find sort of a strength you didn't know you had. Um, and for me, I just feel so grateful. I always hoped to have what I have. I don't know what your experience was, but yeah, my mom would always say, like, you can grow up, you can have a family, you can do all these things.
Right. Right.
But I looked around. I didn't see anybody like me that had or was doing any of those things. And so I met this girl, and things are going really well.
Mm-hmm.
And you have those doubts about, does she really understand what maybe we're going to get into here?
That's right. Yeah.
And then you have kids, and you have these insecurities about, I can't pick them up and throw them in the air, and what's that going to look like? And then you realize, hey man, they just want to use you as a human jungle gym,
That's right.
right? They'll take whatever you can give them.
That's right.
My kids had little strollers, and they used to jump in and be like, I'm in a wheelchair. And they'd like play games where they'd be like, I'm going to interview to be your care attendant, and like,
That's right.
stuff I'm sure other families weren't always experiencing.
That's right.
But they've got a much deeper level of empathy, I think, and understanding. And so, all these things came together, and just a fortunate guy. But yeah, to go back to what I was, yeah, I just think maybe a good sense of being grounded.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm in the early stages of it, but I certainly, I mean, it's been really interesting being in a family as the only physically disabled person in my family, right? I just doing stuff, and fortunately having the major support of my parents, it kind of boosted me in a direction that I ultimately got to, but because I was in all different types of spaces, whether it be political spaces, advocacy spaces, at a certain point, even though I didn't see a whole lot of other folks, especially kids, who were in these same spaces, I didn't know any better. I just like jumped in and was like, my parents think I can do this, so I'm gonna do it. And just one thing led to another, and now they all credit either me or the folks I'm close with, especially in the disability space, with educating them and like creating an avenue for them to really understand disability and accessibility and be passionate about it as any of us would be. So it's been fun to like go through that as a major part of my life, and now transitioning to being a dad and having a young person who will grapple with any like, oh, my dad's in a wheelchair, but he does all these cool things. I watch adaptive sports, all the different things that I'm really looking forward to sharing, and just how that all will come together.
My kids used to go for rides on the back of my chair.
Yep.
And I remember my youngest daughter looked kind of bummed out. I was
Yeah.
like, Sammy, what's up? Like, I just feel a little sad, Daddy. And I thought she was going to say something about, like, can't run, like
Right.
these joggers we see on the path that we're on, you know. So why do you feel sad? And she said, I just feel sad because none of my friends get to do wheelies on their daddy's wheelchairs.
That's right.
And I was like, man, I'm taking you to ice cream.
That's powerful, right? That's some powerful stuff. That is awesome, and it's cool because it's who we do all this stuff ultimately, for in terms of staying connected and like sharing with the next generation and all those things. And I know that your current role super busy and important, and having family buy-in as a part of it is probably a big part of the calculus. And then your potential next role, running for state assembly in California. We don't have a lot of, there are a whole lot of cool parts of it. We don't have a lot of disabled folks in elected office anywhere in the country, including in California. We don't have a lot of disabled voices in terms of being passionate about our issues, and just like all the other things that come with it, being able to be a visual representation of disability in elected office and running for office and all of those things. So kind of what came into the thought process of running for state assembly?
Yeah, super excited.
Nice.
So, look, I love what I do. I love that I've been able to spend a career helping to keep California safe, right? And it's all Californians. We don't ask, hey, are you a Democrat or Republican? Right before we try and help with emergency management.
That's right.
And I want to do that on a larger level. I want to do that in a way that's even more meaningful. And so this feels like a very natural step. And it's uncomfortable in some ways, right? Because there's a vulnerability to put yourself out there. I think for so long, we've looked and said, gosh, I want leaders that understand real issues. I want good leaders. I want leaders that actually represent the communities that they serve. And we look to our left and we look to our right, and nobody steps up. And most recently, I just feel like our responsibility. Right? Leaders have to lead. And so I'm going to toss my hat in the ring. I'm going to do my very best to try and represent the people that I live in, the communities that I've helped keep safe. We're going to do that. And we're going to do it in a way that is truly impactful for all Californians. There's so much, I think, more that we agree on. And there's so much work that needs to be done that could lift all of our burdens, that I hope it's something that's going to really resonate with folks.
That's right. And one of the things that's really fascinating about any, elected office, but especially in California, and in this particular instance, of course, you'll be running for a specific district and representing the constituents who vote in that district, of course. But I think, you said it here, and we can't underestimate how you'll also be a representative of so many throughout the country and throughout the state, who have disabilities, who have family members with disabilities. It's funny because there are all these kind of data points to point out, like, how many disabled people are there in the United States, in the state of California, in different parts of the state. And we say, that's the disability community. But I always push back on that and say, actually, the disability community is way bigger than that. Not just the actual disabled people, but our families are part of the disability community, because they are people who are directly impacted and care about all the things that we go through, all the things that we need and want.
Ask my family if my disability hasn't impacted their daily lives.
Exactly. That's right. And it's important that we have real representation at all levels. So I'm really, really excited. I know all the advocates in the disability space throughout the state, every time we connect and talk about it, they're like, oh man, we're so excited that Vance Taylor's running, and we can't wait to support and do whatever we can to lift up. So just really
I appreciate that. Let's hope a lot of them live in District 7.
That's right. That's right.
It's interesting you talk about representation. It's so important. I know you do a lot of speaking. I know that.
That's right.
And I speak to a lot of youth who have disabilities. And for so long I would ask, how many of you are going to go to college? Right? How many of you are going to fall in love and have families? How many of you are going to have a job you love? And not a lot of hands would go up. And you start to kind of pull back those layers, and it's like, well, I just don't think that I could do that based on my disability. Mm-hmm. And then I say, look, I'm here to tell you, right? I'm here to be living proof that you can do these things, that these dreams can be your reality. And when kids see somebody doing the things they dream of doing, then somehow those things seem possible. Mm-hmm. And knowing that they're possible changes you. And so it's been a real privilege for me to get to be an example in that way. I've also benefited from being able to have examples to look to in my life. I interned on Capitol Hill. I was looking around and was like, man, there's nobody in a wheelchair around here. And then I literally drove into a guy in a wheelchair named Jim Langevin. He was a member of Congress from Rhode Island, the only member that used a wheelchair at that time. And first I thought, great, I find the one member of Congress and I run into him. Yeah. He was so cool. He was like, don't worry, they just broke my foot pedal, no problem. He gave me all his info. He's like, I want you to come check in with me every month. And so I'd pop into his office and just say hi and talk, and he'd ask me about my life and give me career advice. And on the nights when I was at home alone and I felt overwhelmed, I thought, I don't know if I can do this. I would think about Jim, and I would think, if he can do this as a member of Congress, then I can battle through whatever I'm dealing with as an intern. And so I know that representation matters. I love that we can do that for each other. I think the other thing that's interesting about it is, like, Eric, I don't think you ever wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to be a life-changing example today.
That's right.
Right? You just get up and do your thing. You get up and do your best. And if that motivates people or helps people feel like they can have additional strength, dude, that's a cherry on top.
No, it's interesting. I played wheelchair basketball for a while at
balling out, man.
Relatively high level, but my friends, I give all the credit to, like, teammates and competitors and guys who and women who continue to play at a super high level. And I actually linked up with a couple of former Paralympic gold medalists recently, and one in particular.
I love that you say that, like, so casually.
It's one of those things where I have to.
I'm hanging out with these gold medal winning Olympians.
I have to pinch myself every now and then, because when I watch them and think about it, I'm just like, these are the best of all time. Like, these are some of the best players who've ever played. But one of the things that we talked about was being an inspiration. And I think we recognize, of course, the difference between being an inspiration for like simply just living life and like doing just everyday things. That being a separate category.
You woke up today.
Congratulations, you got outside the house. And the difference between that and literally being somebody who motivates people and inspires people to be the best people that they can be, to do for others, and those sorts of things. So, and I think that's what you're talking about. Is like we still have that possibility to really excite and motivate folks. So I love hearing that.
Yeah. By the way, I appreciate what you're saying about family and friends. I'm a big believer that there's that saying about we all enjoy shade under trees we didn't plant. My mom came to this country when she was 22. When I saw her, she didn't speak any English. She worked what I think most people would say are menial jobs. Learned language, got a GED, an AA, went on to get a 4-year degree. Made tremendous sacrifices. Raised 3 kids on her own because my dad left after our diagnosis came through.
Oh my gosh.
And I recognize that so much of what I've achieved or been able to do or experience is as a direct result of her sacrifice. None of us gets here alone. But that message about friends and family and support networks, it's something that resonates deeply for me.
Fantastic. Well, really appreciate the candor and like just talking about all of these things. We're gonna have a couple of finishing questions. One, is there any kind of book or piece of music or film, anything that you feel really excited about right now, something that you think people should check out, and it can be of like kind of current, or it could be something that we should reflect on from back in the day?
All right, so I'm watching Chief of War right now.
Okay.
Super cool.
Nice. Apple
Jason,
TV Plus, right? That's right.
I saw The Residence on Netflix. That was really fun.
Yeah.
Something I think really meaningful. Let's see. I just started braiding wheatgrass.
Oh.
Which has been really neat. One book that I think for me was really transformative was Brene Brown. Wrote a book called Braving the Wilderness. Talks a lot about vulnerability, talks a lot about belonging versus fitting in. I think for anybody that's struggling right now, whether that's with the political climate, whether it's just trying to figure out who you are, read that book. It'll speak to you. But, yeah.
Fantastic. And then the last question, what is your game plan for these next 12 months? I think we know what you'll be busy focused on, but what is your kind of plan of action kind of coming up here?
Yeah, so it's this right here. It's connecting with people, right? I really believe that we yearn for human connection, and especially when we're talking about politics, right? Our political leaders, those who represent us, we genuinely want people there who we feel like are going to work on our behalf. And that doesn't mean, hey man, you're going to vote 100% of the time the way I want you to vote. But I at least want to believe you're a good person. I at least want to believe you're going to try. And if it doesn't go my way all the time, I can still live with that. It's lacking right now. And so I think over the course of the next 12 months, it's going to be my job to try and connect with people in a way that helps them understand who I am in a more personal way, and hopefully make them feel better about being able to get on with their daily lives, knowing that somebody who actually cares about them is going to be there for them.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Vance, for coming and joining us today. We really appreciate you being here with the game plan with Disability Rights California.
Appreciate you. Thanks, Eric.
Absolutely.
This has been The Game Plan, a production of Disability Rights California. Please like, subscribe, and comment on the platform of your choice. See you next time.